social aspect again.
Yeah, that's
I don't even want to say that's a con because it's not unless you're literally in the rural, unless you're like in rural out in the middle of nowhere
where there's nobody around.
In a small town where maybe there aren't as many kids. The pros of homeschooling for me and my experience would have been the flexibility of vacations. I can say that for me, being homeschooled and then my son not being homeschooled for the first kindergarten through fourth, third grade, he was in school. That was a real adjustment for me, like following a school schedule. And some of you may say, that's the only way you can function with your life and calendar. I just grew up with a school system not dictating my school schedule. I liked that flexibility. I thrived in that flexibility. Some people may not. Some people may need that structure because maybe they'd be too relaxed. And I've heard that and seen that with homeschoolers. It's like too relaxed. So I really liked having that ability to do extra school and go on an extended vacation. And not having that pressure of, oh my goodness, we got to be back by this day because we got school we got to go to tomorrow. Like that.
You weren't locked into a calendar. Like,
because I'm sorry, I do not agree with the calendar that the public schools set up. Like, I think part of it's stupid. So for me, the functionality of my life and how I run my life and my schedule does not flow with that, and still doesn't to this day. So I know homeschool families that, you know, they do the RV thing. Like they go all over and they travel and they learn at all these different states that they go to. They're seeing it. Their kids are able to see the things that they're learning about, and that is just such a rich experience if you can give your child that type of experience.
I feel like the main reason why I loved homeschooling is I actually got to be a kid, like you were just saying. Being home with my family and being together brought a sense of unity and togetherness, and that we're a family and we work together. When my mom worked at night, you know, I helped fix dinner at 10 and 11 years old. You know, I helped do the dishes and clean. That was something we always did. It was just part of a team effort, the family unit, just the togetherness and having a respect, not just for my parents, but for my family and my siblings. I always had that sense of just being secure, and that I feel like that's huge, that kids probably don't get that much of nowadays if they're in the public school system. And nothing against the public school system. I just...
Well, it is what it is. There's any comparison. It's not an apples to apples comparison. You really can't. And that's not what we're trying to do in this video. It's not like if kids have to be in public schools, you know, there's tons of reasons why, and we totally understand that. Like, as being parents and being adults now,
this is just the values that I'm looking at my life now, and all these life skills I took away from, and it's because of the foundation I had at my childhood. It's made me who I am today, and I feel like that's a very valuable thing.
Another pro of homeschooling is being able to choose your curriculum and mix it up. Like, you don't have to do one curriculum for because some curriculums are better at language, some are better at math, some are better at history and science. And I think the ability to have the flexibility to mix things, again, sometimes that doesn't work for some homeschool moms. They need it all to be the same curriculum, and that isn't the way it is as much now because there's so many choices out there. It's overwhelming, but it's really finding what works. That is a freedom.
The freedom of
being able to find what works for your child's learning style and your teaching style. That's a big one. The other one was kind of like you were saying, being at home, not being away from home for hours and hours.
Right. And see, me being a parent now, and my children are younger and we're getting into the homeschool age, the thought of someone else, my children being with someone else for more. Most kids are gone from their parents all day, and they only spend an average of like 2.5, 3 hours every night. And within those 3 hours, you're having dinner, you're not being able to connect with your kid, and then it's bedtime before you know it.
And you really can't develop relationships with your kids at the end of the day when they're tired and exhausted. They've given their everything, you've given your everything during the main hours of the day. And when the moms decided to work outside the house, especially in this country, maybe in Europe, there's tons of other countries around the world where the moms don't. Whether they're living in a hut or living in a little village or somewhere, they may not have a job Their job is to take care of their
Mhm.
kids or maybe someone else's kids or whatever. Like, but I think when moms started to work outside the home, there was this elevation to money and status
Mhm.
and things, consumerism, materialism
Mhm.
above the needs of a child
Mhm.
and the development of a human being.
Right, right.
And when that happened, familial interaction really started to take a dive. A child is going to feel safe when home environment is safe. And so the longer they're at home, what happens in a child when they're put into a school and public school environment, there is a subconscious, and I've done some studies about this for physical reasons, like for health reasons, understanding our body's going into a survival mode.
Mhm.
And when you're put into certain situations as a child, a mother or parent is supposed to be there to nurture you,
Mhm.
to make you feel safe, to soothe you when your emotions are up and down,
Mhm.
and to bring you to a state of homeostasis and peace in your body. And so, just as a side note, when you're pushing kids into school environment, it's a survival of the fittest.
Mhm.
With some kids, it's them bullying, there's an intimidation, there's a who can do it better, there's a favoritism with some adults, there's a lot of things like a push to be a certain way and all that. And that doesn't operate as much when you're homeschooled. There isn't a survival thing normally. It's a child that feels more safe and grounded and secure. And I'm going to do a video on this at some point, but the studies about why homeschoolers are better, they work better. They
have more of a work ethic.
They have more of a work ethic. They go to college and they do better in college, or they have their home life is better. Why is that? Because there's videos out there of like just the lack of survival mode and the more of a safety mode that they operate in on a day-to-day basis.
Sense of self and like being able to, you're in control of your choices. Not why is like having that victim mentality. Oh, this is happening to me. It's like, you know what? No, I'm in control. Some things obviously are out of our control, but learning how to work with that. But you're in control of your day, and which you choose this and that. And
there's some wonderful teachers out there.
Oh,
wonderful teachers in the public schools. So this is not a diss on anyone who's a teacher. A parent, if they are truly taking the time with their child that they're supposed to, they're going to be in tune with their child's strengths and weaknesses. A person who only sees your child for maybe an hour a day, if they teach them like one class, is going to have less of an insight into your child's strengths and weaknesses. They're not going to be able to put forth the effort to help them in multiple areas at a time developmentally. So let's say your child is in history class and the child can't write a paper on history because, well, the history teacher doesn't teach the child language.
Right.
And how to compose a paper. Well, maybe the language teacher's not teaching what they're supposed to do because they only have an hour a day and they got tons of other teachers or tons of other students they have to teach. Like if they see a weakness in your child, they might not be able to help them. But then that can affect another class where the requirement is to include other parts of education. But if they're struggling in the other class, then how can that history teacher help when there's a writing issue? There's so many dynamics there, but as a homeschool parent, you can see the strengths and the weaknesses, and you have the capability to spend extra time in those areas where your child struggles. And that's a huge benefit, because where they potentially would get left behind, dare I say, in the public school system, or just ignored, or get yelled at, or get a bad grade, that they may not would have gotten a bad grade if someone just would have been able to take that
time. Right.
And so there's a loss of connection there, self-confidence issues that develop when your child feels like they can't do something when really they probably can. They just need help. They need extra time. They need the right type of teaching. And I do want to point this out too, is the teaching style. Some kids do better with hearing. They can listen to something and they can learn it. Some kids do better visually. Some kids do better with hands-on. Their learning style needs to be catered to. And I've heard this from homeschool parents who have multiple kids. I only have one, so I don't know. But multiple kids can learn very differently. Some of them are self-taught. You give them their stuff and they'll do it on their own.
Like me and my brother learn completely different. He's one of those, you just tell it to him and he just remembers everything. I had to make flashcards. I had to see it. I had to see myself writing it. I had to say it out loud, try and repeat it over and over. I was more of a visual, like I had to try and get it to stick into my brain visually. along with the, saying it over and over and all that stuff. My brother, no, he barely even took notes. He'd aced everything. He was straight A. He just has one of those brains that just remembers everything.
But that doesn't mean that someone who doesn't shouldn't be put down.
Right, exactly.
Like, that's not okay. And so I think that when you have a public school system where there's just so many kids to every teacher, the other thing is the being put down. There are teachers out there that do put their kids down. Now, I will say, as homeschool moms,
nobody's perfect.
No one's perfect.
We all have our off days.
And there are some homeschool parents that I know that literally train their kids like military style, and their kids grew up very dysfunctional. Less of the time when the parent is there, and the parent naturally should be talking their child up in a positive way. Like, you can do this. We're just having a hard day. Let's just take a break and let's move on. Not pushing when there's such a mental block, and just being able to say, you got this. And I know for me, like, I'm still learning that myself, is how to do that for my son, is to not cast down because there's a struggle. Because so many kids, I think, would do so much better if it's just learning how to talk in a way that's encouraging. And most of us don't have encouraging self-talk, so it's hard for us to do encouraging self-talk to others. And so I think the home is a great opportunity to shift that. To take, maybe if you went to public school and people talk down to you, change it. Make it a priority. Put positive Post-its everywhere in your house if you have to, but really change the environment of your home to be positive and to almost overdo the positive, because I think it says, like, it takes like however many positives to make up a negative, right? And I know for me, when we pulled our son out of school, he had a lot more negative things told to him that I didn't realize were there. When he asked me in 3rd grade, Mom, could I be homeschooled? I knew there was something wrong. I'm like, what's going on? And it was a lot of negative talk from a variety of people. And so don't take that for granted. If your child is struggling and they're in a public school, don't take it for granted the power of your positive words for that child. Like, you as a parent, they want to make the parent proud more than anyone else. Like, even if they're not saying it and they're not conscious of that.
And I wanted to add too, me being homeschooled and even going into a private Christian school, I knew throughout my young adulthood, eventually one day, whenever I had children of my own, I knew if at all possible, if I could make a way, if God made a way, my desire was to homeschool my children. Because looking back on it, the foundation that homeschooling gave me in my childhood and my home life made me strong enough to stand up against the ugly things in this world that we live in, all the evilness in this world, not falling for all the bad things that you could eventually fall into. And because of my strong foundation, I don't feel like I ever fell into anything that was like horrible. Like, I never got into alcoholism, drugs, but whenever I saw it even more, whenever I first started working in the workforce, and I saw all of these people, getting involved in all these things, and they would try and get me to, or they would, be like, oh, they even thought it was weird I didn't cuss. They would apologize for cursing around me, and I'm like,
I had that too.
It's fine. It doesn't bother me if you choose to say those things. I was seeing the difference of my life, how it was affecting those around me, because I chose to live differently and to not, I didn't use foul language. I didn't do all this stuff, and they thought it was kind of strange, but it kept me safe.
Well, I think there's the peer pressure thing.
Right.
Even though we had peer pressure within our social groups, like homeschool groups or church groups even, I think the actual peer pressure that leads to more destructive things isn't there as much in the homeschool community.
Right, it's not as much.
And because you're home more, and because you're under your parents' surveillance more, and you're focusing on living life together, the peer pressure, the things that this is just my opinion, but I feel like when kids are away from their parents, they have for hours in a day, there can be a very big hole in their heart. I think there's something there that only a parental figure, and I know some people are adopted and all that, or fostered. So I'm not talking down to anybody who has that situation, but a parental figure of some kind. Sometimes it's grandparents. Sometimes, parents tragically pass away and kids are raised by their grandparents. whatever that parental figures, those figures are in your life, they're supposed to be a filling from them. And when kids don't get that, they go to other things. When you have the reason why homeschool kids on average are more secured in a strong foundation is because they get what they need daily throughout being at home with their parents. They get more of that security. They get more of those questions answered. Am I valuable? You know, am I this? Am I that? Whereas peer pressure in a school, and it makes kids seek out things to fill those gaps. Like, well, if I do this, then I'll be accepted. If I do this, then they'll think good of me. If I do this, and you know, there's a lot of things again that goes back to like perfectionism, like people being the best of the best at sports, the best of the best at their grades, just because they feel like they have to be loved and approved by their parents. On average, the homeschool experience is better. Also because, like you said earlier, doing life together.
Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of homeschool families that are now doing homeschooling are realizing that a lot of the schooling we need in life is to know how to do life.
Yeah.
It's how to do laundry, how to do dishes, how to cook,
just
how to clean together, how to share a space and be a steward of that space, gardening, homesteading, taking care of farm animals, like
and not having that mentality of, oh, that's not my job. We live in this house, we all take care of it and do it together. Just because I'm not the mom, some kids think it's just the mom's job to just do the dishes. No,
or to cook.
Or to cook. No, as you get older, you get responsibilities and chores, and you are responsible, and
that is what teaches
accountability.
And teaches our homeschool kids to walk into
life.
Their life and raise their own families. And I see that from so many people when they transition from being homeschooled to getting married. They may be some of the ones that you see that came from a big family, and then they're raising a big family, and that they're homesteading, and that they're doing all these awesome things together because they've realized that disengaging with some of the worldly stuff out there that feeds that emptiness. It's just empty. Instead of they're doing fulfilling life things together, as I feel like we were created to do. There's less of a push to grow up. So it's definitely
enjoy every age that you are.
Because like when I see like teenagers that are homeschooled, although they want to get their driver's license, they want to, you know, go do things on their own, to get a job and like all this. I feel like there's less of
I agree.
a need to grow up. And there's so much stuff that's pushed on kids in public school that I don't feel like they're actually there to handle.
And all the stuff they're exposed to.
Right. It's like they're exposed to more adult things at a younger age. And because of that, they're thinking that they need to be at that level already.
They need to enjoy the innocence of being a child and not have to worry about who likes who and who's into what. And like, I mean, you're going to have your friends and all that stuff, but you're surrounded by that constantly whenever you're in a school setting, you know, like you said, having to try and get up to that level. And it's just, just enjoy being a kid.
A pro to homeschooling is not feeling like you're left behind or ignored as much like you would in a public school where there's so many kids. There's so many feeling like you're not getting what you need, not feeling like you're seen or you're heard as much. So that's a big summary of the pros. The pros are way more.
Yes,
we're going to talk about some of the cons. Mom's voice gets old. For the mom that's always telling you to clean your room and do your chores. And when your mom's your teacher too.
Yeah, that's a lot of mom.
I'm trying to have grace with my son on that. Like, listen, I know you don't want to hear my voice tell you what to do in math because you're hearing me tell you what to do with your chores too.
But that's why having a balance and having your kids involved in things like co-ops and classes is so important, because then they are getting a break from mom's voice and all that. So that could be a con, definitely.
I think it's knowing when you've had enough of each other.
To
kind of say, okay, mom needs to go to the grocery store by herself, or mom needs a homeschool mom event where mom goes out and spends time with other homeschool moms and kind of just vocalizes her feelings, struggles, where she doesn't feel like she's alone, because a lot of homeschool moms can feel like the walls are closing in on them. For the kids to just get out and play. Just go play. Do stuff. You know, be creative. Mom won't have to say anything. If you get your chores, if you do your school and get your chores done, you can play. Like most of us moms are like, if you just do these things today,
then you're good.
Then you can go and do whatever you want for the rest of the day, within reason. You know, be home and just enjoy yourself, because those things matter to mom. And I think teaching a child, being relational and teaching a child how to fill up your heart, like say, listen, I love you, but mommy has needs too. I'm not here just to fill you up on all your needs all day long and suck me dry. Like, I'm here to serve you as your mother, to teach you, to do whatever God's called me to do as my child, as my student. You need to learn how to give back to me. It's a mutual relationship, and a student and a child needs to learn how to do things for their parent as well. That's teaching
and
them.
honoring their parents.
And not being selfish. I tell my son when he does the laundry and the dishes, you really are helping me. You really are filling up my heart, my love tank, my whatever. Like, a love language for me would be an act of service. Like, if you take care of something for me that I don't have to worry about doing, and you do it, I'll say, sure, go have fun, go have playtime. Like, because that makes me feel like you've noticed that there's something,
right?
You know,
and being aware.
Yeah,
teaching our children to be aware of what needs to be done, of others around
and teaching
them.
kids when they're young,
right?
How to help.
That's
like,
when they're building their character. That's why I really feel like homeschooling in those younger years are so crucial. At least, even if you can't do it whenever they're older, that is when their character is being molded, and we are sculpting them into the humans, the young people
that are going to be walking around, living life.
And so I just feel like that's so important. And like I said, like I was saying, it just gives them that foundation they need. The fact that there's going to be hard days, and
there's going to be hard days.
Just, I mean, it is work, you know.
I remember my mom used to say when she had a hard day, my dad would come home from work and she would say, I'm putting her on the school bus tomorrow. And that was probably only in kindergarten or first grade, like in the beginning. I've had those days too. I don't have any other cons. The social aspect, again, I don't even want to say that's a con, because it's not unless you're literally in the rural, unless you're like in rural, out in the middle of nowhere
where there's nobody around,
in a small town where maybe there aren't as many kids. Maybe you are in a town where there's just a lot of older people.
Yeah, there's so many communities and social opportunities for children. That's not even an issue.
There's just not very many cons to homeschooling, other than less finances available, potentially, depending on if the mom or the dad isn't working and you only have one adult working.
Right.
Yeah, there might be less in the budget for you to live.
And it might be tight, and it might...
But I will say something. I don't talk about this very much on my channel, but I'm going to give God the glory here about this. When I decided to go from full-time work to part-time work to homeschool, financially, it was like it's almost like that money didn't go anywhere. Like, it was almost like that money was still there. I can't describe to you how, but we never felt the loss of that money when I went from full-time to part-time. And then this year, when I took the biggest jump of my life and quit working from working for 16 years, and I told my husband, I'm like, we're just going to do this, because I felt like God was saying it's time to fully invest in our teenage son. In his last developmental years before he leaves our home, I have to be there for him.
Right.
I have to take him to all the social events. I have to, give him more. And when I made that decision, we knew what money wasn't going to be there anymore. And I want to say, I can't even begin to tell you, yes, there are certain things. We haven't gone any extravagant vacations this year or anything like that. But everything has been paid.
Provided for. Yep. God
everything.
Provides.
And on top of that, I just want to mention my husband just got laid off as well. So right now I don't have a job, and my husband got laid off. Because he was laid off, was provided some finances to cover us for a while. And I just so totally can tell you that the peace within our home, even though that happened, going into the holiday season, like not having a job, not having these things, it's like I know God is saying, you put your son, your greatest investment first. You're stewarding his heart, his emotions, his needs above your own. And I know, and I already see that God has provided things.
Oh yeah.
And is going to provide things for an extended period of time until my husband does get another job. When you do invest in your child, even though it feels like there's not going to be money there, when you stop putting money at the top and you put your kids first, and you truly just do that in trust. If you're a believer and you have God in your life as the head, and you follow his instructions, like when you obey those directions, there's just blessing. I can't even tell you where all it comes from, but there's so much blessing. And I think that's something that about homeschooling we have to say is the biggest thing is, yes, you're not going to have all the finances that you think. But if you are putting God first and God is leading you to homeschool, if you feel like you're watching this and like there's a tug on your heart, like I really want to homeschool, but I don't know how it's going to make it work. I thought the same thing when I approached my husband about like, oh, I'm going to quit my job and I felt like he's going to say no. But I prayed about it and I said, God, if this is you leading me to do this, you will make a way.
Right.
And he has. And my husband and I are in unity about it. There is no arguments. And you may say, well, I can't get my spouse to agree. Then pray about it.
Right.
You don't have to convince. You just need to pray and let God work. That was a big tangent on that. But that would probably be one of the other cons that people may say, because I've heard that, is the financial. You may have to make some sacrifices. You may not be able to go on an extravagant vacation, or you may not, maybe it will have to be a family vacation, and maybe you and your spouse might not be able to go on extravagant dates or whatever.
Right.
But you can make it work. I would just definitely like look at your resources. Facebook has a ton of homeschool mom groups, and depending on where you live, there might be a local one. I know we have one for our state that I'm in. I know we have a couple ones that are local for our county. Look out and feel out your resources. And if you know other homeschool families, just start talking to them and just say, hey, I want to know more information about what's available in our area. Some areas may not have as much available. And I do know of some people who live in some areas where there isn't as much. And I know that can be hard. You really have to make your own pros and cons list at that point and pray about it and make a decision if it's worth it. Take it 1 year at a time.
Right.
That's the same thing my mom always did. It's just taking 1 year at a time, because life changes. Things happen.
It does.
And maybe it'll work and maybe it won't. And I know homeschool moms right now that have their kid in one kid in private school or Christian school, and one kid in public school, or one kid homeschooled and one kid, like,
just depends on what your family needs and the individual child's needs.
Yes. Don't do anything where you're going to get bitter or resentful toward your spouse or toward your child or toward yourself. Trying to force something to make it work.
Right. Grace plays a big part in all of this. Grace on yourself, grace on your kids, grace on your spouse. Everybody needs grace.
Yeah. Grace on the people who like say bad things about you because you homeschool and thinking that you're not doing a good job. Yeah.
Right.
Forgive them. They don't know.
Right. Exactly.
So, okay, a few last things we're going to talk about here is, what do we appreciate? I know we kind of already mentioned this, but what do we appreciate, the main like top things that we may appreciate now that we didn't back then? And you probably agree with most of these anyways. I would definitely say the time with my mom. I did not feel like it was a good thing back then. We just had our issues from being together all the time. And
y'all were together all the time.
Yeah, so we butted heads. But I see now how that has been a huge foundation in who I am, how I parent, how I've worked for 16 years. Like, even though my mom didn't work and didn't example working, it was just her nature that was an example of perseverance, or just even the safety and the freedom she gave me to be creative, to be at home and just be, to not have pressure. And, you know, she probably pushed me, I know she did, push me sometimes harder than maybe I needed, that in some ways might have hurt my feelings at times where I felt like I wasn't good enough. But as I've even worked through those things as an adult, I see the love and intention that she had.
Because it was all out of love. It was never to hurt your feelings.
Right.
But us children, whenever you're a child, that's from our child perspective, we always take it personal. We're not, like you were saying, talking about earlier.
Yeah,
there's
like my
a
own
much
son right now.
Bigger picture.
Yeah.
There's so much more than what we're focused on in that moment. She's molding you, sculpting you. Like you were saying, she's being the godly, motherly example of not just a mother, but of a godly woman. She's your role model. And that is exactly how I feel about my parents, both of them. My mother and my father. I know you feel the same way about your dad. He's always been
because the fathers were the support that allowed our mothers to be the homeschool moms. Like I don't want to diss fathers in this either, because you do need a supportive man. Like I know I have to have that at home teaching a teenager. I have to have my husband support me. I've seen that it can be very, very hard
a lot of
on homeschool
tension.
moms. So yeah, the moms and the dads being representative of support.
That goes back to that family structure, the family unit, and the love that's there and the sacrifice. And yeah, looking back on it, you don't realize all the sacrifices that our parents went through. I see it now as a 36-year-old woman.
And like the finances, like God provided the finances for our parents
back then,
to pay
and
for.
I know it was hard.
Oh,
it was very hard
because I mean,
back
it's
then.
like whether it was gymnastics or some other like extra educational class or whatever.
Sacrifice.
Our mom, well, your mom worked part-time. Mine didn't work at all. My mom, I did take that back. My mom did actually have a part-time job. She cleaned houses.
I was about to mention that because you would go along with her while she cleaned.
She would clean houses, and I would actually go and take my schoolwork. That's another flexibility there, where I would, help her clean house sometimes and do a few things for her, and she'd do the most of it, but I would take school with me. And so she was showing me then, she did show me hard work of still getting up and going somewhere and being accountable to somebody, and doing a great job and making sure things were cleaned properly, and still making sure I got my schoolwork done or whatever. But like as a child, you cannot see as valuable. And I keep having to remind myself of that with my own son right now. I keep saying he's not going to get it until he gets to be older, but he's going to get it. He's going to see that everything that I'm telling him is right in this, he's going to value it. I still go back to that, like that freedom of doing life together. At that point in time, we didn't realize that built our character. Like we didn't see that at that point in time.
You don't recognize it as a child, but that's huge.
And then as you get older, you're like I'm doing what I didn't want to do as a kid, and I'm so thankful I know how to do it.
Right.
Like how many kids go to college and don't know how to do their own laundry? I've heard of that so many times. I'm like, what? Your mom just did it for you? And people are like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. Like, because they weren't home. The kids weren't home during the day. They were at school. Their mom did their laundry for them, and I get it. But there's got to be a transition to real life, like cooking. I know people who don't know how to cook because they weren't home with their mom to cook, and I'm just like, teach them to be human beings and
life skills. Just life.
Just like going back to like the co-op thing, like having that we had
it brings balance to everything. That really added. It was just like it just brought that.
It was enough school-like exposure to us, like being with other kids, but it was nice when we had our time at home. Like, okay, it was a good enough experience to have good memories and have good learning experiences.
And we still had homework assignments, and we had projects we'd have to turn in by a certain date. So we had to learn to be accountable and responsible for our stuff, just like any other kid would.
The other thing that really stood out is being protected from hurtful experiences or situations that would have basically crushed our potential. So being home, there wasn't as much of those opportunities that, like whether bullying, whatever you want to call it, or again, getting involved in things that looking back now, we would have been like telling our younger self, don't get involved in that, whatever that is, or just people or teachers or someone that would have crushed us verbally or maybe any other ways, God forbid. But like, there's just situations that we didn't have that. And so we didn't go into certain things with a negative mindset. Like she was saying, she didn't think, oh, I can't do it. Like your parents teaching you and you being around your parents, you went into certain parts of life and was like, hey, I can do this.
An optimistic mindset. Like, you know what, if you at least try, you don't know until you try.
Yeah. And I remember when we pulled our son out of, 4th grade, in 3rd grade, he started to really share that there was someone who was really talking negative to him. And he didn't tell me at the time. He told me like after the fact. And I remember his whole demeanor started to turn really negative. After I'd homeschooled him a semester, a family member actually said, I see a difference in him. He's more positive. Like he's more, and I just like broke down in tears. I'm like, you mean it's doing something? Because I felt the roughness of the transition and I didn't see the progression in him yet. Someone else outside of me was seeing it without a critical eye. And so for me, I realized though that if I would have kept him in that environment, there would have been potential for people or situations to be more crushing of his confidence, crushing of his personality. And my husband went to public school all throughout. He never was homeschooled. And he talks about that a lot, those negative experiences that were there and how he could have maybe been different if he would have had the opportunity to, not have some of those crushing experiences. So I really value that we didn't have that at the time. I wouldn't have valued it back then.
Right.
But because I wouldn't have known what we were protected from.
Yeah.
I feel like we're more capable now because we were protected from some of that stuff.
Right.
For sure.
And I remember telling people whenever I was younger, and I'd kind of say it like, they'd be like, oh, you don't do this, you didn't do that as a kid. I was like, oh, I grew up in a box, I just kind of jokingly say that, but man, I value that box.
Oh,
I'm so grateful for growing up in a box. I don't care. I was not troubled by all the kids these days, the stuff that they're exposed to on their phones and on the internet. They have total garbage at the tip of their fingertips, and it's really sad, and I'm going to do my best to allow my children to be just innocent and enjoy their childhood and not be bogged down by social media and everything as long as I possibly can.
So our final question is, because I'm already homeschooling, I already know what your answer is, but do you want to homeschool, and why? Which I already pretty much know your whys.
Yes.
But do you want to homeschool? And you already said that you're doing some basically like the pre-K stuff right now, right?
Yes. So as long as the Lord allows, and if it's His will, I will be homeschooling my younger children at home as long as I possibly can.
No, basically, we've already given you all the reasons why she'd want to homeschool.
To protect my children, to monitor them, to allow them to be a child and just have fun and to learn and be creative and to have that sense of security and to build that sense of unity and being a family and togetherness, to teach them basically how to grow into a young adult and have responsibilities and have, just all the things that you can. I know there's going to be bumps in the road and there's going to be difficult times of stubbornness, and we're going to hit walls. That's going to happen. That's just life. But as long as we're building that foundation, and the wise man built his house upon the rock. Yeah. We're building them up on a rock. So that way when they do get older, they can withstand temptations and not be pulled into horrible things, and hopefully will do their best to make wise choices in life. So those are all the reasons why I'm homeschooling.
And the great thing is that of course we still know a lot of former homeschoolers that were homeschooled with us. Our area is exploded with homeschooling. So she will have all the resources she needs from me and from lots of other homeschool families. If she ever wants to get into co-ops, there's plenty of options around us. So that's, it's great to know that you have that community and to start in a community like that, because it just makes things so much better when you do have a community, and it's good to know that there's so many resources out there. Watch our next video, because I got some stories that we're going to talk about
the college.
Oh, yeah. I just remembered, y'all are going to want to hear the story, basically of how when I started, there's actually another homeschool friend who I went to college with, Julia.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if I'll be able, I would love to interview her, but she's never really been one to want to be on camera anyway, so I don't know if I can get her to. But her and I were actually closer than you and I were, because Julia and I were in the same program.
Right, at Tech, yeah.
Yeah, and you and I were in different ones because you were in a different program. I remember distinctly, to tie into the whole bubble thing that people say about homeschoolers. I know the ones that don't have televisions, don't have hardly any phones, but there are a lot of homeschoolers nowadays that are not sheltered. A lot of them. I grew up with television. I grew up hearing secular music. We didn't focus on in our home. I was sheltered from certain things, but not living in a bubble as some people thought. So it was just funny that going into college, the question was, how am I going to be? How am I going to function? So you'll definitely want to watch that video, because my professor basically on our first day of college took me and my other homeschool friend, Julia, and basically sat us down and was like, now you're going to hear a lot of words. You're gonna see a lot of things. Julia and I just kind of glanced at each other and we're like, we're not those types of homeschoolers. And he's like, okay, all right, good, because he was kind of worried. Like he needed to cushion us from the shock of certain things. And we were not those types of homeschoolers. So we both had experience.
You were okay for whatever came your way. You could handle it.
Absolutely. Like there wasn't any like
you wouldn't be surprised by it.
No, there was not the shock factor.
One more pro that just popped in my head while we were talking that most people are probably not aware of. It did not apply to me because I did go to the private Christian school. But if you homeschool your child in the high school years, like 10th, 11th, and 12th, you can actually have your child attend a tech school.
Yes, dual enrollment.
And you can do dual enrollment, so your child can not only get their high school credits, but also college credits at the same time. So that is a huge perk that most people do not know and are not aware of. You can help advance your child and push them further in life, and they can get some college and high school at the same time. So that way they're already going ahead and moving in that direction of college.
And there's re-talk about that in the next video too, but that's a good place to end because there are tons of homeschoolers that actually graduate from high school early. Like they can graduate at 16, 17 years old and they can start an internship.
Right.
They can do their college, get their college done sooner, and they can get into if they have something that they want to do where they would be in college for a long time, they can get that started earlier.
Right.
Again, that goes back to flexibility.
Right.
It's just the main thing of homeschooling that's so great is you can choose.
Right.
And have that. And if you know your child's like very determined on what they want to do and they know what they want to do, if they want to be a lawyer or a doctor.
Right. You can go ahead and get them on that track to start moving towards that.
Yeah, so I think we're going to end it there because there's just
we
so
can
much
go on forever.
There's so much we've talked about today. I'm just so excited that we were able to do this because
I know.
I've literally been talking about this for months. So I'm excited to kind of change up my channel and have something brand new to do. Yay. And we'll definitely be excited to do.
I'm excited to do the college one next. I think that'll be fun.
Yeah, it's definitely, I'll have to like really rack my brain and go back to like funny stories and things because our experiences were very different. I was in a certain program with a lot of silly, fun people that were very creative, and so my experience was very funny. She helped me on a project or two that I did. Yeah, it'll be fun. I'll be so excited to talk about it. So I just want to say thank you to Sarah.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
This was fun. This was a lot of fun.
And thank you because we're here at her house. So beautiful time for me to be out of the house and spend time with her. So again, thank you all so very much. And I know...
Subscribe to her channel.
Yes, please subscribe. I do appreciate it. And we'll be excited to share with you that next video of transitioning into college from homeschooling. Make sure that you tune in for that. I will say that the holidays are going to get crazy. So please don't unsubscribe if I don't post next week or the following week because it's just the holidays. Really, we all are going through crazy life right now. So make sure that you do subscribe and you click that bell so you will get notified when we do upload that in January. I will have one video that I will be putting up probably in December, and that will be my end of the year review. I always try to do that. For some reason, y'all love those videos. So I will put that up of kind of how our 8th grade school year is doing halfway through. You love the end of the year, the calendar year review. So my mid-year review of 8th grade, how things are going. I do have some things to share about that, so make sure you tune into that for that, and make sure that you all enjoy your holiday season. Just spend time loving on your kids and then just enjoy the season. So make sure until we see you next time that you
shine bright.